Hey, what's up? It's Madison. Welcome back to my channel. Today is a really fun and exciting day because today we are talking about Mariah Carey's memoir. I am a huge Mariah Carey fan. And I think anyone who knows me knows that I have loved Mariah Carey since I was a little girl, maybe about 6 years old. My first encounter with Mariah Carey was gifted one of her albums, the #1 albums. It's like a black and white cover. She has the straight hair and the dress. And I listened to that album so much as a kid. I just really connected with her. I think as soon as I heard her voice and listened to the lyrics and I looked through those pictures and that album cover, and it was just like instantaneous. I fell in love with her. I think I really saw myself in her, and she's always been a role model for me. Being biracial, being a successful woman, she's just someone that I've always really looked up to. Being mixed race, because growing up I didn't see a lot of people who looked like me particularly. She's always meant a lot to me. And I actually met her one time in Las Vegas at her residency, at her show when she was in Caesar's Palace. And it was like a graduation present. I went to the show, I was front row, and she saw me and waved, and I waved at her. I waved first and she waved back at me. And then I met her at the meet and greet afterwards, and it was such an exciting experience. I didn't say a word when I met her. I had so much that I wanted to say, but I was just like nervous and I didn't say anything. But she remembered seeing me and she said some things to me, and yeah, I literally didn't say a word. I just kind of smiled and nodded, and that was it. She kind of inspired this one story I was working on at the time, which I'm no longer working on. I stopped writing it because it was bad. And I gave her a copy of it because she really inspired me, and one of the characters was really inspired by her. But I didn't explain like what it was. I didn't have a note or anything that I wrote, and I gave it to her assistant. So if she ever saw it, she probably had no idea what the heck it was or why it was important. I didn't tell her, so I kind of wish I had a redo, but I'm still really, it's still amazing that I met her. I'll insert a picture of us somewhere in the video, but yeah, great times. Okay, so I kind of ranted, but I basically said all of this just to say that I'm biased, obviously, when it comes to Mariah, but I'm gonna try to give my most unbiased opinion as possible. So basically, I loved everything about it. So here's Mariah's memoir. This came out September 29th. I read it in about a week. That's actually really fast for me because it usually takes me a really long time to read anything, but I tried to read this as fast as possible so I could do a review on it. There are spoilers in this, so definitely read the book before you watch this video because we're just talking all about the book. Mariah wrote this book with a co-writer. Her name is Michaela Angela Davis, or Michaela Angela Davis. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. So they wrote it together. The book has 4 sections. The first one is Wayward Child, then followed by Sing Sing, All That Glitters, and finally Emancipation. And each of these sections basically just talk about some stories and experiences throughout her life, the ups and downs of her career and her personal life. Start off with some of the things that I thought. I thought it was really well written. I thought it was very fast-paced. I thought it was very interesting. Each of the stories like really captured my attention really well. I liked the first 2 sections the best, hands down. I think particularly when it comes to Wayward Child, the first section about her childhood, there's a lot that I learned about her that I didn't know initially. And I think a lot of lambs will even find that there's a lot of stories in here that they just didn't know because she never told them before. So we just didn't know. So it's going to be really fun, I think, for people who are really fans of hers to read these things and learn these things about her. Some of it's sad when it comes to her childhood. We learn a lot about her brother and her sister in particularly that are, you know, it's really upsetting, especially when it comes to her sister. There's a lot of tough sections to read about some of the things that she did to her when Mariah was just a young girl. So that can be tough, but I think it really speaks to basically why Mariah went through some of the things she went through later in life. We also learn a lot about her mom. We learned a lot about her. We learn more about her later in the book, but we learn a fair amount when she's younger and kind of how her mom, you know, her mom was a good mom, but she was also very neglectful in a lot of ways. She would leave her at home by herself, leave Mariah home by herself, bring strange men around. She even said some really rude, mean things to her in terms of her singing, you know, there was a lot of jealousy apparently from the mom, which is odd. And I don't think, you know, as a child, we would know how anyone would know how to take that. So it was really interesting to read that, though it was kind of sad. But yeah, I love the first section because everything we learned. And in that section, as well as throughout the story, there's lyrics intertwined in the memoir. So a lot of her experiences that she's had are directly related to the lyrics and the songs that she puts on her albums. So it answers a lot of questions for us lambs who have been listening to her interviews, listening to her music, and listening to the lyrics, the things that she's been telling us, and, you know, finally having that missing piece of the puzzle to understand like what really went down. I see more of it in Sing Sing too, and I think personally, I think Sing Sing was probably my favorite section out of the whole memoir, and I think a lot of fans will feel the same way as well, just because we learned so much about what was going on behind the scenes during those years in the 90s when she was making some of our favorite albums like Daydream and Butterfly. Chapters in that section were really engaging to me, like reading about her making Daydream, but then also making an alternative rock album like on the side. We would have never guessed that. Like, that's crazy. And then, you know, recording Butterfly and having that whole secret affair with Derek Jeter, and how a lot of those songs are directly about him. We knew it, I mean, we guessed it, but actually reading the story, like, it's different. Like, it's just crazy what she went through. And those chapters were my favorite because it was really about her separating from Tommy Mottola, from her abusive relationship, and really coming into her own and embracing herself and showing her true self to the world. That was one of my favorite parts of the book, seeing her overcome that. And I think it really speaks to who she is as a person. And it also really ties in with a lot of the major themes of the book. And so that's why I really enjoyed that section a lot. And then I also really enjoyed the first section and the end of the first section when she's made it out of her rough childhood and she's gotten her first record deal and she goes back to that girl's house who called her the N-word. I just love that because it's so petty. It's something that I would do, but it also just speaks to, like, she made it out of that situation and a lot of people wouldn't. The first two sections were really strong and just tell us a lot about who she is, and kind of gives a lot of explanation to a lot of the lyrics and the songs that we've come to love so much. So I really love those sections, and I feel like they move really fluidly. Like, there's a story arc that's happening throughout this, even though it is her life story and it's a bunch of like stories of her life combined together, but there is a theme and there is like an arc that's happening. And then once we get to All That Glitters, which is the third section in the book, it's very much like the climax of the book. It's when everything comes to a head, all her issues with her mother and her brother and Tommy Mottola, like, it all comes to a head. And, you know, people are basically just trying to destroy her out here. Like, it was nuts. And the section was good. It was well written. I think it was very necessary to explain what happened in 2001, what happened with the Glitter soundtrack and the Glitter movie, because a lot of people see that as a failure of hers and the whole breakdown or whatever. Me, personally, I already knew a lot about what happened during that time, so I did enjoy the section, but like, I wasn't necessarily as engaged as I was in the first other sections, just because I kind of understood and knew like what was happening, because I've heard it a lot before. And then there were a few things I didn't know in regards to like the mother and the brother trying to lock her up in mental institutions, but I also watched the Oprah interview before I read the book, so I kind of already knew that as well. So, you know, I did like that section, and I think it was important maybe for other people who don't know her as well to understand that. And I think it makes a good climax for the book, and it really emphasizes like exactly what she went through, hardships that she went through. But I already knew kind of that whole thing, so, you know, I read it, but I just wasn't as engaged as I was in the first two sections. Overall, the third section flowed very well with the first two sections. It just felt very cohesive and natural. If I'm gonna say any critiques now, I would probably critique the fourth section, Emancipation. The fourth section felt very disconnected from the rest of the book. Stories in it seemed kind of random. They were good, but they seemed very random. It was it was very much like career highlights, like moments of her career that she was obviously very proud of. They were interesting to read about because she talks a lot about people that we know and love, like Diana Ross, like Aretha Franklin, like Prince, and all these encounters that she's had with other people. But it is very random. The order too of the stories kind of confused me a little bit. There was a little bit of that in the beginning of the book, like I was kind of confused on the order. It would jump back and forth in the timeline a lot, but not as much as it did in the 4th section. And it kind of confused me in the 4th section, just all the jumping around. It didn't necessarily confuse me because I know her life, so I can follow the timeline, but I think it would have confused other people. I found myself questioning why she was ordering it the way that she was. The section as a whole just seemed kind of random, and it didn't flow with the natural story arc of what the first 3 sections were saying. It was just kind of random. But it had a strong ending. It had a very positive, uplifting ending. And she talked about her children, which she obviously loved. She talked about All I Want for Christmas being #1. So it ends on a high note. No pun intended. It was a good ending, but this section as a whole, it wasn't my favorite section. It was definitely my least favorite section. She talked a little bit about the making of the emancipation of Mimi, but not necessarily as much as I would have liked. And yeah, it just got kind of random after that. So, because she talked about the emancipation of Mimi, and then she goes back and talks about like Divas Live, and it's just like, what's going on? But for the most part, I enjoyed the book as a whole. One other critique I would say is that, you know, Mariah being Mariah, she doesn't say everything. So there's a lot of stuff she doesn't talk about in the book. She doesn't talk about her bipolar disorder. She doesn't talk about Stella, you know, her manager in 2016. They had some legal issues, and I thought she might talk about that. She talk about Mariah's World, the reality television show. She didn't talk much about those things at all. I thought that that was interesting. There's also been a lot of speculations about her voice issues or whatever. I think her voice still sounds fabulous, but there's been a lot of talk about that, and I think some people thought that she might discuss that, but she didn't. I wasn't expecting her to talk about that. But so there's a lot of things that weren't said. And also when it comes to her father, I wish there was more elaboration on that relationship. She talks about him a lot in the first section, and she really describes him as someone who provides a lot of stability for her. But we don't hear about him again until like the last section, I think. Either All That Glitters or Emancipation, but it was somewhere in the end. And we didn't hear about him at all in Sing Sing, and I'm just wondering, like, where was he during this time? I know he said 1 or 2 things that really hurt her, but I mean, he is her father. So I just was wondering, like, why he wasn't there. Like, I also know that he didn't really understand her career, but surely once she got really successful, he could wrap his head around it then. So I just don't understand why he wasn't there. Maybe he was there. Maybe they did have a couple phone conversations during that time. But it really seemed like he just wasn't around, and I'm just wondering why. Like, what happened? That was a really big confusing thing for me throughout the book, because I still just don't really understand their relationship. So yeah, that was another thing that I would have liked to learn more about. But overall, I enjoyed the book. The theme of the book, I enjoyed. She's been through a lot of stuff, and she has picked herself back up every time. I already knew this. The meaning of Mariah Carey is definitely resilience. She is a strong person, and she picks herself back up no matter if the whole world is laughing at her, no matter if people want her to fail, if people are actively trying to destroy her, even if it's her own family. She will pick herself back up. Not a lot of people can do what she has done. And that's one thing I've always really loved about her. The meaning of Mariah Carey is definitely resilience. She is a strong woman, and she has been through it. And it's really clear in the book, the way she writes it and the stuff she talks about, that she has been through some things. But it was really well written. It was good. I'm actually curious to know how much she wrote of it herself, because it was really personal. And there's a lot of moments where she says certain things, and I'm like, it sounds like she at least directly said this word for word, or she wrote it with her own hand. I wouldn't be surprised, because she's a great writer. Yeah, it was very personal. She does tell us a lot. There are some things she doesn't say, but we're not entitled to know every single thing about her life, so that's fine. Standout moments for me, I would definitely go back and read the Make It Happen chapter when she's getting her record deal. Chapters about her making Butterfly and that affair. All those sections were very engaging and exciting for me to read. I also love the pictures. She includes some very personal pictures of like her family, pictures of her as a young girl. She includes even pictures of some old boyfriends like Louis Miguel and Derek Jeter. Nick Cannon isn't in the pictures. And when she talks about him in the book, it's very much like, oh, it was a fun little fling. Like, they were married for several years and had kids, so I don't know what's going on with that, but it's none of my business. But I'm just saying, the way she talks about Derek Jeter is very different than she talks about the other men in this book. Again, it's none of my business. I'm just saying. But yeah, it was fun to look at all the pictures, to read the stories, to read about her getting out of that marriage, overcoming the whole glitter situation, getting out of her childhood. Like, those were the moments that were really engaging for me. Obviously the moment on the roof. Yeah, but overall the book is good. It's getting a lot of good reviews. She's a New York Times #1 bestseller. What I hope to be one day. What I will be one day. A lot of people are writing good things about it. There isn't really anything negative to say about it. It's really good overall as a whole. I would probably rate it like 8.5 out of 10. I think that's my official rating. Maybe a 9 out of 10. Somewhere in there. I'll definitely go back and read more of it because it was just that good. And I think it'll really inspire a lot of people. So I would really encourage you to go read it. Not just if you're a fan, but like just if you don't hate Mimi, read it. You'll enjoy it. It's a very inspiring story. And it really gives you more perspective into who she is. She's not just this diva glamorous person. Like, she's a real person who's been through some things. This book was always just kind of a confirmation of a lot of things I already suspected. Fans will love all the hidden meanings and the songs and the lyrics and learning about the makings of the album, her childhood, and all that stuff that makes her who she is, which is Mariah Carey. Definitely go get the book, read the book. It's great. And I also heard the Audible is really good too. I've heard a little bit of parts of the Audible on like Instagram and stuff. She sings throughout it, and it's really nice how she intertwines the lyrics throughout the whole book. It's very artful. Okay, so that's kind of it for today. We'll be making more book reviews on my channel and my blog in the future. It just takes me a long time to read, but more content like that will be coming soon. I've had a couple books that I've read over quarantine that I want to review, so expect that in the future. In the meantime, you can check out the link in the description for my book review that I wrote on the meaning of Mariah Carey. You can also check out other articles on my blog if you want to read anything else. And yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.